Hello everyone and welcome to my review of the Moza AB6 bundle. This is a force feedback base and stick combination, and disclaimer out the way up front, this was sent to me by Moza for the purposes of review, but they were completely open. There's no restrictions at all on what I could talk about for this review. I don't have to give a good review or anything. They just wanted an honest review. But yes, this is a product I did not pay for myself. So yeah, do bear in mind that I did receive stuff in the form of this hardware for this review, but there are no restrictions. Everything I'm going to say is honest. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's jump into the review. Now, first of all, what do you get with this bundle? So you get this lovely piece of equipment here. Down at the bottom, we've got the AB6 base here, and yes, this is rather a chunky base. That is our force feedback base. It comes with this stick, and it comes with a mount to mount it to the desk. Because yes, this does really need to be desk mounted in order to work. Comes with both the bracket to mount it on the desk and the section that actually holds the Moza. All the screws that are required come with the pack. In terms of the setup, it's actually quite straightforward. We do nicely have an actual manual which comes with this, which is a nice change from some other products I've had recently where you either have to Google it or just wing it. And the setup is pretty straightforward. Basically, you just set up the bracket, mounting the base on the bracket. You've got quite a lot of options there on how high you want to mount this. I've got this set really quite high, just because I'm used to desk-mounted setups. So on the desk setups, like this one over here. And so I found that was more comfortable than when I had it low down. You can also shift it a little bit backwards and forwards. I've got it right tucked into the desk here. Again, I don't have any kind of sim pit setup. But otherwise, it's just a case of putting it all together. The most complicated bit is putting the stick in, and that is just a matter of plugging a wire into the little port, and then you just screw the base on. So really not that bad, and you just Google the Moza cockpit and you get the software downloaded. All works pretty much out of the box there. So I'm going to divide this review into two parts, really, because we've got two different devices here. We've got the stick and we've got the base. I'm going to start off with the big bit, the base. The base is the big selling option here. This is the big upgrade, and so we'll focus on this. But I do want to talk about the stick as well a little bit later. So for the base here, this AB6 unit, so this is a force feedback unit. In terms of what's on here, there are a few buttons on the side. These are just push buttons, and we have a couple of these little axes. But the main thing is that it's got this force feedback unit. It does come really nice stitched leather. It's a really nice little quality feature you don't normally see with a lot of flight sticks, even high-end flight sticks. And everything is solid metal there. But I suppose the main thing that everyone's wondering is, well, what is the force feedback like to play around with in-game? Now, obviously, my channel is mostly a DCS channel, so I've done the most testing in DCS. And there, the exact feedback you get varies by module to module, but in general, what it is doing is both acting as a stick shaker in order to give you some actual kind of kinetic feedback of things like when you're nearing stall conditions, or when your gears are coming down, when bombs are being released, things like that. Very similar to Stick Shaker on the Wing that I've covered in a previous session. Then it also gives you some other feedback on top of that. You've got a lot more detail that they can give you. There's a lot more difference between a tiny little vibration and a severe vibration. So instead of just the stick shaking as you're approaching stall, it's going to shake harder and harder and harder. equally you can get some more nice feedback kind of pushing you one way or the other in terms of what the actual aircraft would do. Certainly, I'd say it is more immersive than the stick shaker alone. You're kind of feeling a bit more like you're holding something that's attached to an aircraft. You've got that kind of gentle, continuous rumble there from the engine. You've got all of the sort of force of the stick trying to center itself. By default, there's no centering. That's all handled by the software. There's no spring on this thing. So a different aircraft will have different amounts of centering there. And certainly I've found that when you are in those stall conditions, when you're nearing the edge, pushing an airframe to its limit, it's a lot easier to read this. You can tell that you're nearing that stall condition. You know exactly when it's just about to go. So you know when you have that option to pull a little bit more, when you don't. And that is really, really quite useful. The really big difference comes from helicopters and any other aircraft that have a similar trim system. For those unaware, most helicopters will trim by you push a button and the stick will hold the position that the stick currently is in. So it's not quite like aircraft where you're trimming up and down and that's turning a trim tab. Instead, trimming in a helicopter is just generally hold the stick here. Now, without force feedback, that can be a little bit difficult to pass and understand, especially because there is then a delay that you push the button and, well, depending on the settings, it either immediately centers, in which case you shake off to the side, or there's a delay while the software kind of pretends that it's centering, and you have to quickly get stick back to the center position in order not to then move off to the side. You don't have to worry about that with the Moza stick here. You just hold down that trim button, and when you release it, boom, it's going to hold that position. Really easy to trim for nice level flight. And the other really nice thing about this is there is absolutely no forgetting that you've got this trimmed. You know damn well you've got it trimmed because the stick is over to one side. And so when you're coming in for landing and you want to reset that trim, you've got that natural reminder. Now, I've also tested this in the IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad series, and quite similarly there, this operates on the same general principles as DCS, that it gives you kind of kinetic feedback when you're doing things like firing guns, and especially when you're nearing that stall condition. And there I'd say it's probably a little bit more important because in warbirds you're very, very often flying towards the edge of that envelope. There are a lot of planes that you will normally be playing right on the edge of a wingtip stall, and it is very easy to enter one of those by accident without any kind of feedback. This gives you a lot more feedback there. Again, yes, stick shakers do a similar thing. This gives you that little bit more fine-tuning, so instead of just knowing you are close to a wingtip stall, you know exactly how close you are, so you know when you can afford to pull a little bit more, or when you need to back out of that climb before you lose all controllability. Did also try out on War Thunder, just because it's another supported game that I happen to have installed. War Thunder's implementation on its own is a bit weird. Basically, unlike the others, there is no force feedback for stick centering. Instead, it is purely based off of the control surfaces and the strain on the control surfaces. So it will just be opposing what direction the wind's trying to turn the stick. And without messing around with the Moza cockpit settings, that just ends up being really weird because it ends up kind of acting like a helicopter trim, but it will just randomly trim to different positions, and so it will be trying to hold itself in certain orientations depending on the orientation that you've got. Now, it's fine, you can overcome that. The software does have the option to mess around with all sorts of things, including introducing an artificial spring, and you can absolutely do that. And if you put on an artificial spring of about 50% is what is suggested on the Moza site. Yep, that absolutely works. It then just becomes kind of a wrestling match with the plane. Certainly is more realistic, I would say, but it is very quickly becomes very exhausting. I had to turn the strength of the force feedback down quite a bit because it was just wearing me out over a very short period of time. If you do want a lot of realism there, you want to feel like you're having to wrestle with the controls in a fly-by-cable type setup, then yeah, this does give you that kind of feedback. Now, one thing to note there is that in terms of force feedback sticks, the AB6 is on the weaker end of what it can generate. It has a peak torque of 6 Newton meters. Compare that to the AB9, which has a peak torque of 12 Newton meters. That's a big difference. And then you can compare that against the Cyber Taurus from Wing Control, which starts off at 16 Newton meters and goes up to 63. So in terms of the loading this can generate, it's on the small side. I know that's going to bother some people, but honestly, this has not bothered me at all. Now, I am a pretty weedy person. I am not the strongest person. But this thing giving its most force is absolutely fine for me. Honestly, it's powerful enough as is. I can force this thing when it is pushing fully in the opposite direction, which is kind of fine with me. It is a little bit tiring, a little bit hard to push through that sometimes. I can certainly imagine that the larger force would be a value if you've got a stick extension so that you're putting more moment on the sticks. You kind of want more force back there. But certainly for a setup where you've just got it attached directly to the unit, this is absolutely fine. I've had no issues in terms of thinking this thing is too weak for me. If anything, I tend to tune this thing down a little bit to make it a little bit more comfortable for long sessions. All right, so turning over to this MHG flight stick here. So this comes bundled with the kit, and pretty much it's an alright middle of the ground type flight stick. Now, I am going to be comparing this against my main use flight stick. This is the Wing or Wing Control Orion 2 F16 flight stick with the stick shaker extension here. And honestly, the main thing that we notice is there's a lot less controls here. In terms of what controls you've got, we've got 3 5-position hats here, here, and here, all used by the thumb, all pretty comfortable to get to. We have a little mini stick here which can be configured to another 5-way hat and always has a push button. Got 2 rear push buttons, 1 little dinky push button. We've got a 2-stage trigger, so we've got first stage, second stage. And over here on this end, we have a single 2-position switch and a push button accessed by the index finger. And that's a decent amount, but it's also not a massively outstanding amount. Certainly, I've had no problem binding everything I need to for simpler aircraft, and certainly for things like IL-2, where it's all warbirds, have no issues getting everything bound here. But on DCS, it really depends on the module. Some modules, yeah, absolutely, you can get everything you want to here, especially your early Cold War aircraft and your warbirds, absolutely fine. But if you're going to more modern things like the F-18, F-16, A-10, I've found myself running out of controls here. You can sort of do it, especially if you bind this to a 5-way hat, as opposed to a mini stick. You can sort of get there, but I have been missing the sheer number of controls that you get with the WinWing variety. The one simplification that I don't mind at all is over here on these finger sections. The WinWing does have a 5-position hat there, accessed by your index finger. Problem with the 5-way hat is I find it really awkward to use all 5 directions nice and independently with my index finger stretched out and around like that, especially the kind of sideways motion of your finger, so up, down on the stick. Instead, it's a lot easier to do forward and back. And what Moza have done here is just simplify that to just forward and back, just the controls that are nice and easy to get at, and then giving you a push button there that is nice and distinct from all the others. In terms of the construction here, it's mostly plastic on skin, mostly smooth plastic. It feels absolutely fine. We do have a textured section here. I doubt that's going to come out very well, but it is quite a nice strong grip there, which is nice for what you're going to be wanting. You're going to be needing to force this thing around sometimes. That gives you good solid feedback there. Yeah, certainly not a bad stick, but not a high-end stick. And certainly I would compare it a little bit more to, say, the WinWing Ursa Major here in terms of the number of controls you get. This also has a 2-position switch. This has a 5-position on the index finger, 3 5-way hats on it, a mini stick, and 3 buttons. Is about the same, but this is a much, much cheaper little stick here. Now, yes, you do get extra controls coming from the base with these push buttons here and this pair of axes, but the problem is if you're using this as a HOTAS setup, then your other hand is on your throttle. And if your other hand's on the throttle, then in order to use any of those buttons, you've got to let go, move all the way down to move these around. They certainly are possible, and certainly you can use these as your kind of once every now and then commands. Things like engine on, absolutely fine. But if you're wanting to have something you can easily access, this is not easily accessed in flight, and especially not in combat. I do want to talk about the software here, and the software is actually really quite nice for this. Software on a lot of hardware isn't great, but Moza have done a good job here. So we've got a little list of supported games on the side here, and it's very, very quick to set one of these up. You simply can go to configure, you put in the path. Very often you can simply click config and it will find the path for you. And it does everything. For games that require some kind of Lua file, like DCS, it will put the Lua file in place. Otherwise, it gets everything set up for you, nice and quick and very, very easy. The sticks setup, you get a little bit to play around with. The main thing that I mess with here is the grip settings. This is what you use to switch between the axis mode and button mapping, and there is also a mixed mode, which is particularly nice, where you've got both an axis and a set of buttons there. You can mess with the lights if you want to. You can set their colour if you particularly want to. I've had no real reason to. I'm quite happy with just the default green, but it is full RGB. There aren't a lot of lights. The main set of details that you can edit, though, come from the stick itself, and here you have a lot of options that you can mess around with. So you can alter both the maximum torque output and the force feedback output if you're finding it is too strong. Very often as I lower this a bit. You can set it to have a spring, in which case it will auto-center. The stronger you put this, the stronger the imagined spring is. So you put this a tiny bit if you just want it to slowly center when you let go of the stick. See there, it's not actually fully returning on that strength. I can up it There we go. Now I've got self-centering stick, but that really feels quite free. Equally, I can pop that down to 0 and I'll just use whatever the game settings are. We've got various others to dampen the forces, to add more imagined friction. And then if that isn't enough, you can go into much more detailed settings, particularly here in the expert settings. We've got all sorts of things we can tweak and edit. We can change maximums and minimums if you don't want to have to be pushing yourself through the full range. And I see it does auto-calibrate whenever you turn it on. Because it can move itself, it will just move itself through the full set of motions and then center itself, so you don't have to worry about that. I did have to update the firmware here. I was having issues with the initially installed firmware where for some reason, although it calibrated fine, it would kind of detect a maximum of 80% movement and then would try to massively force the stick back to be centered, so you had this kind of hard wall around 80%, but an update of the firmware fixed that completely. Got no issues since I did that. And one other thing that I just want to talk about before I start summing up my opinions and experiences is this really does need to be desk mounted, and it did take me a while to find where this was comfortable. So I am used to on-desk setups. I like on-desk setups because I can just leave it there. I've got space on my desk. This thing just lives there, nice and happy. I don't need to do any setup. I can just load up a game, play, and I find that works well for me. This, though, really not a good idea to have this on the desk. I did try it. The force of Z isn't that much, but between it having a very high center of mass just because of how tall this thing is, and the force it's generating, this thing will flop over while it's trying to move, and it's quite a heavy unit. You don't really want this thing falling over, and it's basically impossible to control, so you do need this mounted. Now, there are screws in the bottom. You could drill it onto the desk if that's what you're doing, and honestly, altogether, it's not that much taller than my Cytec, there's not Cytec here, than my WinWing here. So if you do want it desk mounted, you can certainly do that, but you are going to have to do some DIY. Certainly a neat option would be to cut out a hole in your desk. There is a little lip down here, so you could absolutely have this thing mostly submerged into your desk with the actual mechanical part under the desk. That is not what I wanted to do for the purposes of just a review video. Now, I've tried various different positions. Initially, I tried it further back. I found I prefer it further forward. The big issue I have is because I'm used to on-desk setup, my throttle is normally on my desk. And you really can't have the throttle on the desk and a stick on a mount like this. Otherwise, your one hand is too far forward, the other hand is too far backwards. And on my first session with this, I hurt my wrist with the weird angle I was having to pull to both access the throttle and this. Tried various positions, but my solution in the end has just been to get some spare wall shelving boxes that are here, lovely IKEA plug there, and just position my stick on here. This is absolutely not a permanent solution. I would need to actually get a proper desk mount for my throttle if I was to continue using this. Now, you can absolutely have centered in the middle. I've found, me personally, I quite like this centered here where it's in line with my armrest. So my arm is nice and straight while holding it. I find this immensely comfortable. I've tried different things, but this is where I found this is by far the most comfortable for me. Long gaming sessions, absolutely fine with this in this position, not getting tired, not getting any weird aches and pains. And so, yeah, you will need to mess around, find what is comfortable for you. I know other people with the stick have said they love it in this center position, but everyone built a little bit differently, so you will just need to find what you prefer. So yeah, now it's time to try and collect my thoughts and give you my recommendation on whether this is worth a purchase or not. And all in all, I think it depends a lot on what you have right now. So I would say that for me personally, I found the jump from going without any kind of feedback to a stick shaker was much bigger than the jump going from a stick shaker to this full force feedback system. It is certainly an improvement. This is better than a stick shaker. There's no way of really arguing that. You get more information here, more responsiveness. You can tell a lot more. There's a lot more fine detail there. Equally, for helicopters, this is amazing in terms of getting that trim position to actually work nicely. And certainly if you don't have any kind of stick shaker, then yes, I would certainly recommend when you are looking for your next flight stick, if you're looking for a big upgrade, go for something with full fidelity feedback is probably worthwhile. If you've already got something with a stick shaker, then maybe this is something that you can do without for a while. It is better, but it's not game-changingly better. Certainly, having that input is very useful. It's not going to make you a better pilot, but it is definitely going to immerse you a bit more. Also, playing with this in VR is kind of amazing. You've got just all of that sensation input there. You can see the stick shaking in front of you and you can feel the stick shaking. That is really quite awesome. So yeah, very happy with the base. I'm not sold on the stick. And honestly, right now, for me, I have a very hard choice of do I stick with the Winwing stick, which I love and has all the controls, or do I go with this one? Now, the obvious option is, well, can't I just put the Winwing stick on it? The problem is it doesn't fit. Moza have designed this with the compatibility to fit standard Thrustmaster sticks. So I could absolutely take the stick off of my old Thrustmaster Warthog and put it here, which may be something that I end up doing. The problem is the actual mounting. The screw to actually attach it is on the wrong end. On the Moza, it is on the stick. On the Winwing, it is on the base, and so you can't put the two together. There are modules to be able to convert between one and the other. They used to be sold by Moza. I can't find them anymore for available on sale. Can get some available. I do have one on the way from a second-hand seller that I am going to try out, but it probably isn't going to be in time for when Moza wanted this video to come out. So I can't report whether that works. There are also third-party options available. Those do get kind of pricey, though. Now, the other option is Moza do have their MH16 flight stick, which is a very close copy to the wing control flight stick with the extension added on. It's not quite perfectly there, but it has almost all of the same thing in an almost identical layout. Really, all it's missing is it's got that single button instead of the 5-way hat on the index finger. Then it doesn't have the extra trigger on the front, but it does come with more 5-way hats, plenty of 5-way hats there, and it comes with the pinky finger brake or paddle switch. And so, honestly, if I was going to buy this myself, I would end up getting that. The issue is you can't get that, the AB6 base on its own, as far as I can tell. You can get the AB9 base, which is the upgraded base, and there is a pack which has all of this together. Honestly, I'd say that if you're into flight simming for DCS, that is probably the better route to go. Spending that little bit more to get the MH16 flight stick, I think is going to be worth it in the long run. If on the other hand you are just interested in planes that you don't need all of those controls on, whether that is early Cold War and DCS or whether that is IL-2 Warbirds, then yeah, absolutely. I think the stick gets you everything you want, and for a pretty reasonable price all in all. The entire bundle with stick and base and the mounts and everything all included is £400 in the UK. You can convert that to your own pricing points there, and that's downright reasonable. Yes, it's definitely more expensive than a normal mid-range HOTAS, but it's comparable with a full HOTAS setup. You're just going for the stick and you're getting the force feedback instead. And it is going to be cheaper than Wing Control's offerings, and Wing Control's offerings are also huge. They're ridiculously huge, to the point that I don't think that I can fit those in my current setup. I'd have to do some really big changes there. All in all then, I think the force feedback base is great. It gives you enough of a force feedback for me to be absolutely happy with it. It's not the strongest one on the market, but for me it is absolutely fine. I don't think I really want a stick that gives me more force than this. I would just end up tuning it down. Very happy with that. Happy that it comes with the mounting bracket. I think the stick lets the whole setup down a little bit. I would prefer to get this with a better stick. And yeah, so my probable recommendation, if you do want to get the base, is instead go for the MH16 stick. Equally, if you've already got something like a Thrustmaster stick, they should be compatible. I have not tested that myself, but that does seem like a good option just to give you a few more controls on your hand there. Now, if you are interested in picking this up, I do know that Moza, at time of recording, are running a summer sale. The AB6 is not on sale, unfortunately. The AB9 and the MH16, the kind of next step up, are both on sale. And so certainly worth checking out if you are wanting to go for a little bit more of a higher end version compared to what I've shown today. I do have an affiliate link down below, and that is at mozaracing.com/Jeebus. If you would like your purchase to support the channel, no pressure there at all though. If you'd like to support the channel for free, then do consider posting a like, comment, subscribe. It all really does help get the video shown in the YouTube algorithm, which is a very fickle beast. Equally, if you do have any comments or questions about this, if you have a different opinion of this stick, please do leave them down below. And if you're looking for more hardware reviews, I will be linking my entire playlist of all the hardware reviews that I've done there, including the Winwing stick that I repeatedly compared this thing against. As always, until next time, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.